Everybody good to go? Okay, everybody ready? We're good to go, Marcus. Okay. Welcome, everybody, to our March 17th, 2022 regular meeting of the Marysville Board of Education. We previously called the meeting to order and had an executive session, so I apologize for the delay in getting started here tonight, but we are ready to go now with the Pledge of Allegiance, so if everybody would stand and join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and also happy St. Patrick's Day to everyone. I would now accept a motion to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting. Motion by Ms. Savage.
Second.
Second by Mr. Smith. Roll call, please.
Ms. Savage?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Ferguson?
Yes.
Mr. Keck?
Yes.
Ms. Devine?
Yes, motion carries. Next on our agenda, I would accept a motion to approve Brenda King, Creekview Food Service, as our classified employee of the month.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Savage. Second by Mr. Keck. Jonathan.
So I am honored to introduce Brenda King as the Employee of the Month for Marysville Schools, as she was selected by her peers. And this is what her peers had to say. Brenda does a wonderful job taking care of our students at Creekview. She is a hard worker and has accepted every challenge this school year has brought. She and her staff are doing a wonderful job for our department. Brenda is a strong leader who not only shows great hospitality to her staff, but also to her customers. She knows her students by name and is very skilled at anticipating dietary needs and restrictions while also showing flexibility and compassion. She makes a positive impact and sets a wonderful example to everyone she comes in contact with. Her contribution in the lives of students will be remembered for years to come. Brenda organizes the kitchen flow and food to serve over 850 meals a day. She did this the first half of the school year with a staff shortage. Brenda goes out of her way to purchase gingerbread house kits using her own money for the multiple handicapped students to put together and then display on the serving line during the month of December. The gingerbread houses are returned to the students to take home before winter break. This is just one of the many things Brenda does for the students at Creekview. She is doing a fabulous job. Meal counts are up, and her staff are doing an awesome job. Brenda, congratulations and thank you.
I can't imagine fixing 850 meals a day. I just think when my kids come home, I struggle to do 12. Thank you. We'll have a roll call here and make it official in a second.
Ms. Savage?
Yes.
Mr. Keck?
Yes.
Mr. Ferguson?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Devine?
Yes, motion carries. It's official. Thank you again, Brenda. I love the gingerbread idea that you had. I mean, it just speaks volumes, so we really appreciate you. All right, next we have a presentation from Bunsold Middle, public participation, yes. But there wasn't any, thank you. I knew that, right? Okay. So we'll skip over public participation and go back here now to the presentation from Bunsold Middle School.
Good evening.
Hello.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to spend a little time talking about all the wonderful stuff that's going on here at Bunsold Middle School this year. I wanted to start off by saying that, of course, coming off of COVID and not knowing whether we're going to be masks, no masks, all in, not all in, this year has presented a ton of challenges. However, all of that being said, one of the things I want to talk about is I couldn't be happy to report tonight that in spite of all of that, our staff at Bunsold has demonstrated resilience and persistence, and I'm both grateful and proud of them and the work that they have done during this school year. It has absolutely been challenging, but it has also been a great year, and I'm happy to report out to that night, so I'm excited for tonight. Next slide, please. So when I started thinking about what it was that I wanted to talk about tonight, I wanted to focus on two specific things. First thing I wanted to focus on is a little bit about addressing the needs of the whole child. Middle school in general, if we all think about back to what middle school is like maybe when we were there, all kinds of things are happening. They're looking to find their voice. They're trying to figure out who they are and where they fit in the world. And in addition to that, they're just trying to figure out what that next phase in their life is going to be when they leave us in middle school after 2 short years and then move into the high school. And so one of the things I want to say is that although all of that is happening at Bunsold Middle School, whether they're in 7th grade or 8th grade, it's what I love the most. In my career, I've had the opportunity to be at a high school. I've had the opportunity to be at an elementary school, and I've had the opportunity to be at a middle school. And I joke a little bit because when I graduated from college, my teaching degree is 7-12, and I was asked, would you ever consider to go to a middle school? And I say, oh, I don't know about that. And it has been, I can't think how many years it's been now, but well over half of my career, and I was blessed to have the opportunity to move to a middle school, and I don't ever want to go anywhere else. You have opportunities where you walk into the building and you've got kids this big and you've got kids this big and all of the other things that come with it, but it is one of my favorite ages to be able to work with. So one of the things that we started thinking about, because of all of those transitions and our kids coming out of all of the other items that's faced them since the beginning of the pandemic, we started thinking about what are our needs right now? What are our needs at Bunsold Middle School? And is there a way for us to start thinking about what those needs are? And can we begin to offer an opportunity for something a little bit different? So this summer, our building leadership team met and we got together and we were looking to find a way to redefine a time that's set aside in our school day in order to look at how we want to be able to support students a little bit differently. Normally, that particular portion was for gap closing for academics, and in addition to that, some enrichment. Well, we're still doing some of those things as well, but we thought about what was that next step? What was that next piece that we needed to think about for our kids? And so that being said, we started those discussions, and we've continued those discussions all year long. Every month we meet to try to determine what it is that would be able to help our kids be able to figure out and navigate those waters of middle school. So that being said, I would tell you after almost through the year and meeting monthly, we've learned a lot of lessons this year. Certainly moving forward into next year, we'll make some changes and adaptations as we've learned and grown through that process as well. But when I think about that, I think about that we have an opportunity that we can, again, express that, to work with the whole child and focus on that. So that's one of the focuses this evening. And the second focus that I want to talk a little bit about is our academic growth. Sometimes I think we forget that prior to this year, the last normal school year our kids had, especially like right now for our 7th graders, was when they were in 4th grade. And so thinking about what they have been through in the last several years, we also wanted to focus a little bit on academic growth so that we could talk about how we are on an upswing in spite of those challenges. Next slide. So this presentation is split into 2 parts. So Mr. Scott is with me tonight. He is an 8th grade science teacher here at Buntsville Middle School and was on our building leadership team this year. And this summer, he had this vision of how we wanted to redefine or reinvent what that pocket of time was, about a 30-minute window that we have daily. And when he came to me, he said, I haven't got it figured out yet. He said, but this is what's in my mind. And then in February, I believe it was February 2nd, Mr. Scott presented to our staff during a professional development day. And I've allowed him, I guess, the autonomy to make this vision come to life. And when I heard him present then in our professional development, I was like, this is really good stuff. When it comes to the items that I talked about on the first part of the 2 focuses that I want to talk about this evening, when it comes to that piece, he took that and created that vision, made it come to life, and did something special, I believe, for the group of kids that he was working with. So I appreciate what Mr. Scott has done. He can teach, has taught. There were a lot of questions and a lot of feedback when he presented to our staff. And so I thought that this would be a wonderful presentation to share with you. And please know I can't take any credit for any of this. Other than giving him the green light to say, go ahead, let's make it come to life. So I appreciate his initiative, his thoughtfulness, his innovation in order to make this happen tonight. So Mr. Scott?
I appreciate the opportunity to share what we've been working on this year. If I'm being honest, when Michelle presented the idea that we were switching our, what we call plus time, from sort of prior to this year, and really prior to the pandemic, as a science teacher, I didn't have math and reading in my classes, and so that we needed for remediation. So the science teachers and the social studies teachers had 30 minutes to create whatever we wanted to create. And I had a rap class that I taught here at Buntsville that was amazing. And we would produce and perform our raps here, and I loved it. And so I was really bummed when I heard that was going away. But when I heard what the vision was for the new idea for this 30-minute period, I thought, you know what, this is going to be awesome too. And so I had a chance this summer to do some thinking about what I would hope to see from this time period. And leadership development was something that I feel like I've always had a heart for it, but I felt like it's time to put something together. So I started working on a sort of a framework for what I wanted to do to teach these kids. And so on the next slide, the framework that I use is here. So what I feel like I want to start with in this class is giving these kids a stronger sense of identity, because I believe that before they get into a sense of purpose or a plan for action, they have to know who they are. They have to know what their core values are, what their personality type is, and that's going to provide that foundation for them so that once they have that sense of identity, that will begin to inform and give a more clear sense of purpose for whatever it is that they try to do. And once they have the purpose, that's going to drive their actions. And so that's been the framework that I've used to build this class around. So once we started, I broke it into 4 quarters. The first quarter, we talked about leading yourself, developing that sense of identity. The second quarter, we spent a lot of time talking about how we connect with other people, because anytime you're in a position of leadership, the majority of what you're doing is working with other people. So you connect with those people first, and then quarter three, we've talked a lot about leading other people, and then now we're moving into the fourth quarter where we're looking at how do we use these tools to influence the culture that we are a part of. So a couple of the things, I don't know, it's been an interesting process. I'm very comfortable flying by the seat of my pants, and I've included a video. It's about 1.5 minutes long. This is what my class has looked like this year, so if you don't mind.
Some people like to climb mountains. I like to build planes in the air.
I grew up wanting to be on a wing, wanting to be up this high.
Sometimes the temperature up at altitude will reach 60 below. It's brisk, it's refreshing.
You never know what you're going to come across up here. Canadian geese, mallards,
Owls.
These people back here, that's why I come to work. That's why I build airplanes in the sky.
We're not just building a plane here. We're building a dream.
I love this job.
I get a lot of thanks up here. When I look over there and I see that little kid, the look in his eyes, that's all the thanks I need.
EDS, managing the complexities
That
of the
is what
digital.
my class has been like for me, and I just try to be honest with my kids, say, listen, we're making this up here, but here we go. We're going to try this, and it's been awesome. So I wanted to show you, talk about just a couple of things that I've done in the class this year to give you a sense of what that experience was like. So if we can go to the next slide. In the first quarter, we did several things to try to develop that sense of identity. So we did personality tests. We talked about habits, have them identify strengths. Let's consider stereotypes. Why are they there? We talked a lot about core values. And then we had a final project at the end of the first quarter where I wanted to treat it almost like they were creating their own brand, to think of it that way. So they had to write a mission statement, and a lot of the mission statements centered around the core values that they identified, and then even go so far as to create a logo. If I had a huge budget, and I'm just throwing this out there, I would love for each one of these kids to have a hat or a t-shirt with their logo on it. I just thought it would be really cool, to let them wear their brand and logo. But we had a great time with that. In the second quarter, the connecting with others, we talked a lot about social media. We watched a movie called The Social Dilemma, and just discussed the issues that social media brings into their lives, the good and the bad. We talked about how to deal with conflict. We talked about understanding differences and kind of, are you a giver or are you a taker? As we moved into the third quarter, we talked about leading other people. And one of the things that I think the kids have slowly begin to realize is that while we're talking about what leadership is, really they're already leading. It's just a matter of understanding what they're doing and how they're leading and which way they're leading, and a stronger sense of purpose behind what they're doing. And we did a lot of talk about storytelling, and then for this one, I had them, the final project for this quarter was to develop what we called a why talk. And it's based on the idea of a TED Talk, but I had them pick something that was important to them and develop a talk about it. And it started with a story, because I felt like I wanted them to help us connect to why that was important to them and draw us in by connecting us to their story. And then they told us why it was important and what we needed to know about it. And I was really, really pleased with the work that the students did. And it was impressive to see even some of the students who don't love to speak get up and figure it out. And it worked really well. As we move into the fourth quarter, we're into the action phase. And I don't know exactly, we're still building the plane, but we've got some pretty neat ideas on the table for the fourth quarter. There have been some things that have come from this class that worked really well. There were some things that didn't work so well. The first thing on the list there, the 3-persons exam, what that was early on in the semester, or the first semester, I heard of this idea where you're 3 people. You're who you think you are, you're who other people think you are, and you're who you really are. And it was supposed to be this really vulnerable moment where we get together in a small group circle and talk about these deep, emotional things. But it was like the 3rd week of the program, and it didn't go very well. And I realized that that was something that we didn't have the trust in our group that was established well enough for them to go deep enough that early. So I feel like we learned, it takes a little while for these students to learn to be vulnerable with each other and to trust each other, but we tried. We did another thing called a map challenge with bad maps. So I sketched out these maps of the building, and I hid things around, and they had to use a terrible map to try to find the object. And most of them did. One group didn't find it, so then they collaborated with other groups, and eventually they got everything, and we came back and talked about the challenge of using a bad map and the idea of the map being your directions for what you're trying to accomplish. And if the map is bad, it's going to take a lot longer, and you may never get where you're trying to go. We also use the 16 personalities test. That's an online tool. I didn't like it as much. I know a lot of people use that. I thought it was way too complicated. The descriptions of the personalities, it was just over everyone's head. So we came up with this other idea, and I think this was a much better test of personality. And if we had time, I would love to try it, but I'll just share the idea with you. But I had them tell us about your dream car. And so I had them Google a search, pull up your dream car, and just hold it up. And then I had the other students in the room say, what do you know about this person based on the car that they have pictured here? And it was amazing what you were able to pull out about someone's personality just from looking at their dream car, if they were risk takers or if they were very practical, if they were adventurous, if they loved the outdoors. And all of these things came out in this dream car. And then from there, we used the analogy of the car and the map, and it's just sort of become this analogy for the course where as we've developed the sense of identity, we're building their cars. We got to put the wheels on it. We've got to figure out how the engine works. We've got to figure out what the fuel is. That's all part of developing their identity. And then the sense of purpose is kind of the destination. Where do you want to go? So we need a good map for that. But before we can even get on the map and begin the journey, they have to figure out how to drive their cars as well. And so this is all part of the process, and we're on there. I don't know that we're actually on the road yet, but we've got the cars in a drivable spot at this point, I think. So we're trying to learn how to drive. We did a strengths test that was really, really effective. The mission statements, there are examples in the links there. But fundamentally, I feel like I've learned from this experience is that these kids are ready to lead. They just need they need an opportunity to really reflect, and it takes time to really get a true sense of who these kids really are, especially like Ms. Kaufenbarger was saying, middle school is such a social developmental period for these kids, but they really develop a strong sense of identity in this building. And it's been a huge privilege of mine to have time to work with this group that I've got to help them see who they are, what they're capable of, help them find their sense of purpose, and hopefully it informs where they go in the future. And I know one of the big pushes in the district this year is to have high-quality student data. And I don't know that there's anything I can do in this last quarter that's actually going to measure and give us high-quality student data on this group of kids. But I think that if we invite them back in about 10 years, we'll have our answer. And I'm optimistic, so there you go. Thank you very much.
Did anybody have any questions for Mr. Scott before he gets down there? Nope.
Did you have some questions?
I just wondered if anybody had any questions for Mr. Scott before he sits down there. Nope. Oh, yeah, or comments or something. So
Sorry, I just kind of ran off.
Yeah, let's go ahead.
Yeah, you're not going to get away this easy. No, I wanted to tell you that I really admire your courage. Anytime you try something, it's a risk. And as you've pointed out, as you have gone through this journey with the kids, you've had some bumps in the road, you've had some things that didn't work, but you've had the persistence to keep going, to realize that we don't have to continue doing what's not working, we can move on to some other things. And it seems as if you're kind of honing in on a really, what sounds like a really effective way for kids to learn about themselves in a non-threatening, I'll put it this way, limited risk for them. And that in that environment, then you're going to be able to build the trust and the confidence that they have that they can make good decisions for them. And I can see where trying to get high quality data on that is going to be, maybe impossible. But I think the journey is is where the value is.
Yes, sir.
And I really admire you that. I was fascinated that you've kind of honed in on the cars and the maps as a key or central component of how you're pulling in some of the other things. Where did you come up with those ideas, and how did you get those things kind of married together?
The 30 minutes before this is lunch, and I've avoided going other places, and I sit in my room during lunch and I think about it. And there have been a lot of great ideas in the final 5 minutes before class starts on this thing. But I feel like the central part of what I've done with the identity and purpose and action came from a good friend who was actually here 2 weeks ago to speak to this class, because one of the things I've done in this quarter is I've invited a few guest speakers who are leaders in their fields. And so the guy he's a leadership consultant, and he and I go back to our college days, but he's in Columbus, and so he came and spoke and did an amazing job. But those three components are a big part of what he teaches his clients, and through conversations with him, that's where that came from. The car and the map thing really was very organic. It just happened, and as it was happening, I realized this makes sense and it seems like a good idea, and so we've just built on it as we go. It really is like that video, but it's working.
Well, I'm glad that your lunch works well. I hope you get something to eat during that period of time.
Yes, sir.
But I want to hopefully look to others at Bunsold and some of our other buildings. I think what you're doing is, for me, exactly what I hope takes place in our school buildings. So thank you very much.
It's my pleasure. Now, I will say, I feel like in some ways I've had to be careful because I've almost put more effort into this than I have my core content. But I'm comfortable with that material, so I know what I'm doing there. But this one has required more effort, but it's been a lot of fun. And I've found a lot of joy in the process. And in fact, I wrote my own mission statement, which I'd never done. And it really grounded me, I think, in what I want to do. So it's been helpful for me as well.
Well, earlier this year, we took a tour of the buildings. And the one thing that was consistent in every single building was that the greatest challenge was the social and emotional well-being of the students and also our staff. And so as I've listened to you, I know the students are getting benefit, but I have a sense that you also are kind of finding your way.
Absolutely.
And I think that's going to be critical. We know we've been through a very difficult time. We know it's going to take an equal amount of time, maybe even longer, to finally get everything put back the way we would like to see it. But it's this kind of thing which I see as having real value, because if kids feel good about themselves, it's easier for them to do math and reading and social studies and those kinds of things, because they have a map and they know where all of those kinds of things, along with science, fits in to their future in terms of their own personal growth as well as any goals that they have in life. So again, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I was wondering if you've gotten any feedback from either the students or the students' parents in regard to, leadership development, and how maybe the parents have seen or the students have seen themselves improve.
That's a good question. We've had parent-teacher conferences twice this year, and I've had a chance to talk with a few of the parents of those students during our parent-teacher conference time, and they have all been very grateful for the opportunity that their kids have had in the class. And I have received positive comments. I don't necessarily have a specific story to tell from a parent and a child, but it's definitely been received very well. Mm-hmm.
I was going to ask kind of a follow-up question is, in your opinion, how's this course, this content, transform the culture at your school?
That's a great question. I feel like that's my hope in this fourth quarter, because I feel like one of the things we did 2 weeks ago is I had them pull up, I said, Google action quotes. And we're just going to create a collection of action quotes and talk about why they connect with us. And the overarching theme of everything we pulled up was, unless you take action on these things, what good have you done? And that's kind of where I feel like we're at, is we have laid a foundation. We've, like to use the analogy, we've built the car, but we've got to learn how to drive it. So we're going to have to make some test runs. And so we're trying to figure out what the test runs look like. And so I don't know yet. We're in that process of trying to figure out if it's a project that as a whole class we do here at school to try to do something to encourage culture here that's positive, or if it's more of an individual thing where each student does something to either influence their own world or the world around them. That's the goal for this last quarter, is to put it into action. And so I do believe that creating a positive culture is so vital for success, like Mr. Smith was saying. Once these kids have that, everything else, I believe, will fall into place. And I think that that's here to a large extent, but it could always be better. But yeah, that's the goal here.
As a follow-up, I did appreciate the map quest, so to speak, because it is like a leadership in action, and like how other teams were working with each other to find it, using the tools they have, and that's kind of how these last 2 years have been, is leadership in action, just figuring out the tools that we're having. The map sucks, but we're going to figure it out, right? One activity I'm working on personally, Donald Miller wrote a book, and he's inspired me to try to write my eulogy. Now, I don't know if this class is ready to do that, but it's with thinking within the end of mind, kind of your mission statement. But it definitely, like, what do you want your eulogy to read, and then work backwards from there. It's kind of that might be something, I don't know, something to think about.
That's interesting, because on my notepad here for quarter four, an idea that came to mind this week was, could we write a book and have each kid contribute a chapter on lessons in leadership in middle school? What is that? And compile the chapters. So.
Well, I don't have a question, but I do just want to thank you for your leadership.
Absolutely.
And I guess I do have a question. Do you feel like there are other staff members that are willing, ready, able to kind of carry on with this program? Because I know you're not going to be here.
Right. When I had the chance to share here at the building, I got a lot of feedback to say this is what this time really could look like. Because I think building wide, it has had a different flavor in different rooms. And I don't think that everyone has enjoyed it like I have, if we're being honest. I think, you know, there's a workload that everyone is able to carry, and some people just don't have the time to pour into that 30-minute period like I felt. It's been my passion this year.
Right.
But I think my hope is that, if nothing else, people can borrow this framework. And I know our building leadership team is capable of taking this and kind of fleshing it out into something that might be more manageable for everyone. I think in year one, you know, we're all building planes, and the planes look different and they're in different phases, but I think, you know, I got enough feedback from when I shared here that I think there are people who would be willing to collaborate on this idea for sure.
Great. Well, I know just from the past, I know that's a real strength of your building, you know, kind of like taking these experiences and pulling out the pros and kind of working through some of the issues and everything. So thank you again very much. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. So you can see why I wanted him to talk a little bit, because I think it was everything that when I had no idea when we started down this pathway when I first met with the building leadership team, but I knew that we had an opportunity that presented itself. And the other part of it is I wanted, as he mentioned, that collaborative spirit, if you will, to come from them. And so that's kind of how we started. I think in one of the previous statements I made earlier, I said, we learned a lot of lessons. But I also told you I was proud. And I was proud that he's like, yep, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to take the, I'm going to take the risk, and I'm going to go, and it was super powerful. It's exactly what I had envisioned, but we didn't have all the steps put in place. And I know, Andy, you had said to me, you said one of the things that scared you the most is that you're very visionary and you were passionate about it, but at the same point in time, you had no idea what steps to put in. Look at the product that you have produced. So I wanted to share, because I think it was something really important to share, and I wanted to. So that is our March celebration, and I think that's a huge celebration, so that's why I wanted him to come. The second part of my presentation tonight is about academic growth. We have some highs and lows in all transparency. The slide that you're looking at right now is kind of just a little bit, before I get into academic growth, it's just a little bit about what this means, because I do have a couple of slides in there that's actually our data, but to give you a framework. So I just simply want to focus on student growth. I want to focus on where did our students come to us, and where are they now, and have we had the opportunity to grow them with the time that we've had with them this year. So that's kind of how I went about. So when you look at this graphic, if you will, this gives you a flavor or an idea of where our students, this is not our data, but where our students score as it's related to our lowest or lower performing students, our middle range students, and then our higher performing students when it comes to just their student growth. So our data is generated from giving a diagnostic assessment 3 times a year. We have those strategically placed out on our assessment calendar so that we can continue to see where is our progress throughout the year, and then what kind of mid-course corrections or actions are we taking with our instructional strategies for the ability to close our gaps. So that's kind of what this is about. Hopefully that makes sense, and when we put it all together at the end, hopefully you'll have a better understanding. To the right, those colors are really important. Those colors are the same kind of colors that we use throughout our analysis of our data, determining where our students fall. When you're looking at that, meaning, as it says, your red and kind of orange-yellow, I guess it's yellow, being below expectations, green being at, and then the blue and the purple being above expectations. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so what you're seeing is our data this year from those diagnostic assessments at the moment. I've got it broken down not just into whole grade levels, but we also wanted to dig a little bit deeper and take a look at our subgroup data as well. So those colors, the green means the on-track, blue is gap closing, and then the red is we have some significant risks in those areas. That gives us tremendous feedback on what kinds of processes do we need to now put in place while we're still going through the process of instruction this year, since this year is not over, and how can we even close that gap more. But it begins to uncover things that allow us to personalize our instruction for learners. Now, this is the whole group, if you will, but we can even get down to the individual student and drill down the data and identify those things. And so this information was generated based upon what is called, I guess, what would be typical growth, and whether or not we exceeded what that typical growth was, or we stayed right in line with that typical growth, or we fell below. So when you look at this and I analyze it, clearly, in 7th grade, we're in pretty good shape when it comes to English language arts or literacy. And then in 8th grade, you can see that we're struggling with all students, and we're also struggling with students with disabilities, but as well as our gifted population. But part of the reason why all students are struggling is because those other two subgroups are filtered into that. So really, when we talk through that process, when I think about where our next steps to start out focus, it would be those two subgroups, and then hopefully we would see the uptick then for the all students in the 8th grade. Any questions on that particular slide, or do you want me to keep going? Keep going? Okay. All right. So then the next slide that you see is our actual data, and what I did is I grabbed our information starting back in 1920. So 1920 would have been, in March of 20 is when we were remote then for the remainder of the year. And you can see in 1920, we had that uptick swing from Diagnostic 1 to Diagnostic 3. And you can see then when 2021 hit, we had a dip in our growth in terms of where our kids were at. Again, is it where we need to be? No, it's not. But you can see that this year in 21-22, we've started that uptick again as comparison to where we were from 1920 to 2021 and then 21-22. And this is all reading data. I don't have this particular graphic broke out into just 7th grade or just 8th grade or the individual subgroups. This is what Bunsold looks like as a building at the present time. Next slide. So then you see next our mathematics summary. You can see that our data doesn't look as good in math, that definitely has to become an area of focus for us. You can see that again in 7th grade and 8th grade both, that we're struggling in 7th grade, our students with disabilities subgroup, and our gifted population as well. They're at that slight risk factor. And then also too, then in 8th grade, our students who are economically disadvantaged. Interestingly, that our students with disability in 8th grade are right now on target. So. Next slide. And there is our overall, again, with everybody, the entire building. That's what a snapshot of Bunsold Middle School looks like since 1920 into our current school year, looking at those box and whisker plots that we talked about from that initial graphic. Next slide. So, overall, our data in some places looks good, and some places we have a lot of work to do, but uncovering that information then allows us the ability to make instructional shifts, instructional decisions, to be able to start really addressing some of those individual needs of learners for the idea that we'll start to see even more of an uptick in that student growth piece. I stated earlier that we always have work. And even those where we're on track or we're above, we always have work to continue to keep and to provide the best opportunity for our kids to challenge them, to push them a little bit, to get them outside their comfort zone as we work through them, whether they're on track or below track. That's always our goal, to take them from where they're at and move them forward on wherever their learning journey is. And I think that we're doing good work. I'm proud of where we're at right now, but we have work to do. We have work to do. Questions?
I just want to make a comment kind of going back to Mr. Scott and what he's doing, because obviously that 30-minute time frame before was for some of those intervention pieces, but I mean, I truly believe that because of all of the other challenges that the kids have been through, I think that some of that high-quality data that he talks about is going to show up, you know, just because of taking the time to say, you know, we really do care about you and we do want to get to know you, and you know, I think that their actions in the classroom are going to reflect that good, the positive side of that. So, you know, I'd like, because they use that 30 minutes, or maybe explain a little bit about how you found ways to provide some intervention without that time period.
Well, so to answer your question, they're there. They still exist.
Yeah.
We have devoted not all 5 days of that week to that.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't go completely like all 5 days are going that way. So we kind of split a little bit. So there's still 2 days a week, Tuesday, Thursdays, where they still work on that academic support and that gap closing. Mm-hmm. We also have a homeroom period that allows for the ability for, again, that additional academic support. But there was a shift for me that I was hopeful for, and that shift for me was that that a large portion of this happens in the classroom with the classroom teacher, because they've identified what that, whether it be formative assessment data, summative assessment data. So philosophically, and we've been talking a lot about this year, that I think there's 3 things important when it comes to data. The first, you got to collect it. That's the first thing you got to do. Second thing you got to do is you got to analyze it. You got to understand what it means. And the third thing is probably, in my mind, the most important, and that is, what is our response? What is our response to that data? And then we collect more data to see if our response is moving in the right direction in order to generate success for kids. So it exists, but not as much. But coming into the beginning of this year, when I spent some time thinking over the summertime, you know, I felt like that connection, that social interaction, that ability to relate and foster and create relationships was going to be huge for us this year coming into that, because our kids have been isolated for such a long period of time. So I felt like there's always a give to get, but I felt like redefining what that 30-minute window looked like was important for us, because I think, although I don't have the data to support that, the end game is going to suggest that we're going to get a lot from that by just repurposing and redesigning what that looks like.
Right.
That was just my thoughts.
Thank you. Great work.
Thank you.
One question. Did I understand that right now in literacy, there's significant risk, but in math for 8th grade, so in literacy there's significant risk, but in math it's slight risk. Did I understand that correctly? I can't go back to that slide.
Yes, correct. For all students, okay. That's correct. Based upon those subgroup data, based upon the subgroup data, there is a slight risk for all 8th graders, but there is a significant risk within that 8th grade group for students with disabilities.
Okay.
Okay.
Is there any data that shows us why, I guess, we have higher performers in math and literacy compared to literacy? Is it the way instruction? Is it our method of instruction? Is it, you know, when we're at home, is it easier to go through math courses and stay on track, so to speak, compared to literacy? That literacy thing is 8th
Sure.
grade. It's kind of something that worries me a little.
Sure, understood. I don't have that like at the moment to set, but I know that that's part of the work that we're looking at across the board. I don't know if, I don't know the answer to that question yet. I do know that, how do I want to say this? So there's two sides. There is growth, and then there's achievement. I would tell you, if you look at our achievement scores in literacy are higher than our achievement scores in math. But we're growing kids more in, well, I don't want to say more, but we're growing kids in math and not growing them as much in the area of literacy. But our overall achievement scores when it comes to that are actually higher. And what I mean by that is our students performing at the proficient, accelerated, advanced. Now, one challenge that will come out, I hope come out, as far as I think about moving forward is when you think about where our kids are at with where they scored on the achievement level. So like if they ended up at proficient, then what do we need to do to get them to go from proficient to the next layer up in that achievement? So it's interesting to dig through all of that, and I don't have that, and I don't have an answer to that.
I think
but it's a great question.
You've clarified some of that for me, so thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Any other comments? Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Mrs. Kavenbarger. We'll look forward to seeing you.
All right.
At building visits pretty soon.
I can't wait. You know
Okay,
you're always
great.
welcome anytime. It's
All
one of my
right.
favorite days. So thanks.
Sure,
Thanks for
thank
letting me
you.
come up and talk.
All right, next up, it's the Ohio High Point report, and I think you all received an email from Mr. Cox. Their meeting is next week, so he just sent a few updates for us, and he did, so I'm sure you guys all had a chance to look at those. Thank you, Mr. Cox. Next, our superintendent's report, Mr. Langhouse.
All right. Just a few updates with enrollment. Currently for the 21-22 school year, we're at approximately 5,410 students in our K-12 population. Last year, this time, we were at 5,208. So we're up approximately 202 students at this point. We opened up for kindergarten registration earlier here in the month of March. Just a quick update on that as well. With our alternative kindergarten program, currently we're at 29 students. Last year this time, we were right at 29. So kindergarten, currently we're at 276 students. Last year this time, we were at 243. So we're actually up 33 students compared to last year this time. Now that could flow differently here in the next couple of weeks too, but also too, just a reminder, last year was our largest kindergarten class that we've had in many years. So we're gonna continue to monitor how many kids actually enroll here extremely closely. Hiring updates. We've started the hiring process quite early this year to get a jump start on it due to retirements, resignations, and/or internal shifts or new positions due to enrollment growth for the 22-23 school year. So far, we've posted 25 positions. We've filled 11 of those positions. 7 of those positions are in a finalist candidate stage, and 7 positions are in the paper screening and/or first round of interview stage. So we're moving right along. Our team members have been doing a great job sending great candidates for the finalist stage. Should be a big agenda in April for you to see. Strategic direction meeting was held earlier in the month. We thought it went really well. Currently, the team, we're reviewing the data, not only from the stakeholder meeting, but as well from the community survey. Our next meeting is going to be in May, and the goal is to have a draft strategic plan to bring to our stakeholder group in order to get further feedback. So, process is moving right along in a very positive direction. Last thing, just wanted to touch base on this last Saturday. It was exciting to see the Marysville Showcase back in full force. It was amazing how many smiles were on the faces of the booster members, the parents, the community volunteers, the kids, the visitors, the visiting students. Just a lot of action at Marysville High School this last weekend. A lot of energy, a lot of positivity. Also, too, I've had several parents and volunteers just talk about how helpful and friendly and approachable our custodians were all weekend. Also, too, several comments about our food service team members that worked the weekend as well. Since the kitchen was being used, you know, we have to have a team member there. And the comments that I've heard was the food service team is extremely patient with the volunteers. And again, very knowledgeable and very helpful and friendly. So it was great to hear that. It was just great for that energy in the building all weekend. So that's it for my report.
Okay. You know, I was thinking, as you were talking about hiring, I know that we do have somebody out in the audience that may or may not be able to be here by the time we get to that point in our meeting, but maybe if you want to talk a little bit just about the process that we went through for this, to fill the opening of our high school band director.
Well, pending board approval, of course, this evening. Mr. Stephen Fannin is here in the crowd this evening, and we had quite the extensive process in order to hire a band teacher and director for Marysville High School and our K-12, really our program. And Mr. Cochran took a huge lead in the process and really helped design the process, so I wanted to give Mr. Cochran a big shout out for his efforts in collaboration. But really there was multiple phases that the candidates went through. It was pretty intense. Initial interviews with several administrators, and then another round of interviews with another group of individuals, and then a big evening of interviews with a parent group, a student group, as well as a staff group. And then after that, Stephen, the finalist, he met with myself and Diane, as well as Mr. Cochran and Mr. Chafin for further interviews. And we're definitely recommending Stephen for the job, and we're hoping that he gets approved here tonight. So, but very extensive, especially the evening of the multiple rounds. You know, feedback was that it was a tough process, but a very positive one.
Right. Well, thanks for explaining that. I know how important, how much we value our band and just the reputation they have. So I think it's important for everybody to understand just the time and effort that went into the whole process. So thank you. Any questions for Jonathan? Sure.
Is this an appropriate time to have Steve introduce himself, since?
Generally, we do it when we get to that point, so.
And Stephen may not be able to stay until the actual board action is taken tonight. And Stephen, we understand that you have a rehearsal you need to get to tonight. So no offense whatsoever if you need to head out and hold your commitment this evening. We just wanted to say thank you for being here tonight.
Yeah. I mean, and I suppose if you would like to just come up and say hello, you can, you know. But if you could. Yeah. Siri's not sure she understands that. But anyways, just know that we will be voting on you later tonight. So, and I'm sure we will see you if you're not around later. So thank you. Okay, treasurer's report.
Okay, a few different things to update you on. First off, just a quick update on the renovation project at East Elementary and Central Office. I had mentioned that we would have an architect contract soon. We were hoping that would be this meeting. We actually got it this week, so we didn't want to just throw that at you right before the meeting, so that will be ready for the next board meeting. We'll also hope to have a new schedule, updated schedule for you. Currently, what's happening, OHM, which is our architect, and Russilli is the construction manager. They are currently in the design, I guess, creative process right now in working out a plan. Once that plan is at a level that we're happy with and able to show you, we would do what next would be to ask the board for approval of a GMP, which is a guaranteed maximum price. I hate to keep making projections of when this will happen because I'm always wrong, but I think we'll probably have that around May, is the hope, with a projected start date of July. There's also on here related to that, but not necessarily, is there's a resolution for the roof replacement on East Elementary. That's actually outside of the actual construction project because that was going to be done regardless of how the building were to be used, because that roof is kind of past due for these repairs, and we needed to, I guess, lock in the contractor to do that work so that we could have it done in time. Any questions on that before I go to the next topic? Next thing I would talk about, also on the agenda tonight, we have 4 resolutions for a bond refunding. We talked a little bit about that last month, I believe. Originally, we were talking about refunding of 2 bonds. We've actually increased that to 4 bonds now. Obviously, with what's going on in Ukraine, there's the potential that could have impact on rates. So far, that's actually held rates lower, but there's a chance that they could swing and go up. We have the opportunity, if rates go too far where they're not in our favor, we can actually hold back and not do the refunding, so we've got flexibility. These resolutions just give us the go-ahead that if things remain in our favor, we can go ahead and pull the trigger and do the refunding. There's really not much risk with the first 2 bonds, which are the ones we talked about originally, that those should go through. The other 2 is the ones that we'll have to wait and see whether those happen or not. If they do, all 4 do go through, based on the rates that we're projecting to be available at the time, we would potentially save in excess of $2.5 million in our bond fund, which is a direct savings to our taxpayers. That's debt interest payments that they would have to pay over the remaining years of those bonds that would be reduced, and it would save our taxpayers money. So that's great news. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was there's another resolution on the agenda tonight for regarding a solar farm project. This resolution came about because the Union County is looking at a solar farm project that would be coming into our school district. The county has asked the school board to make a recommendation based on 4 scenarios they've presented as to which of those scenarios the school district would recommend. I just would point out that the county is the entity that actually has legal authority when it comes to this decision, so the school really doesn't have any actual legal authority. It would only be a recommendation. And of these 4 options, I also should note that there really is a 5th option, which would be that we don't even really have to do a recommendation. This is just something the county's requested. But of the 4 options that they've given us to decide between, option 1 that they mention is basically status quo, which means if they do nothing and the solar farm doesn't come, here, I won't get into the details of the numbers. You have that in front of you, but they give the tax that would be generated based on the current use of the property, which is currently agricultural use. They give a second scenario where if the solar project came and there was no pilot, which is basically a tax abatement, if that were not in place and they were paying full real estate tax based on the valuation of the solar farm, they give a 3rd option and a 4th option that are both, options 3 and 4 are both where a pilot is in place, pilot meaning payment in lieu of taxes. So if option 3 or 4 were to happen, the solar farm company would, in lieu of paying real estate tax, they would pay a payment directly to the school district in lieu of those real estate taxes. Comparing option 2 to 3 and 4, Obviously, the revenue is going to be higher in 2 because there is no pilot in place. That's just full taxation. In options 3 and 4, they've given an estimate on what the revenue would be for the school. The difference between options 3 and 4, with either option, there's a certain amount, which it's calculated at $2,000 per megawatt, that the county has in revenue. The county would have the option of keeping that revenue for themselves, which would be option number 3, or the county would have the option of divvying that revenue out among each taxing entity proportionate to the pilot payments. That would be option 4. So option 4 would be an increased revenue as compared to option 3 because of that money being divvied out by the county. We are talking about significant revenue. Currently, I'll get a little bit of the details. In scenario 1, the property is currently generating around $50,000 annually of tax revenue for the school. If this project were to come in without the pilot, we're projecting that it would generate around $1.2 million annually for the school. And then option 3, the pilot where the county were keeping that additional revenue, the school would receive pilot payments of $583,000, and that would increase to $742,000 under scenario number 4.
Okay, so I guess, and I think you've been in several meetings with the commissioners, with the solar farms and all that kind of stuff. When you look at those options, do you have a preference?
Looking at it from a financial standpoint, the one piece that would stick out would be if the company comes or not, because if the company doesn't come, then financially we would be on scenario 1, which is the $50,000 per year. So looking at generating some additional revenue and helping our taxpayers, I would recommend scenario number 4, only because the idea of scenario number 2, even though the revenue would be higher, I feel like there's a risk that the company would likely not come. That's something that the company itself has said that they wouldn't come if there were no pilot in place, and our attorney made that same comment.
Okay. And I would just point out, even if, like in option 4, that's where that additional $2,000 per megawatt gets divvied out back to all of the tax recipients there, that the county is a part of that. So the county still stands to collect quite a bit of additional monies, whether they disperse that $2,000 or not.
Right.
Okay. I guess the only other point is just that reminder again that this project has already been approved. And so it really is up to the commissioners, and I guess they just want to hear from us whether or not we have a preference if they decide to offer something to this company. They're just asking for us to share what our preference is. So, like you said, we don't have to, but I guess if we can, we will have a resolution later on, and so I'm sure we'll have some more discussion later. But does anybody else have any comments that they would like to make now? Sure.
On option 2, does that takes in the current millage? Is there any room for growth? Is that a projected statement out to the end, or is that? I mean, it's easy. Number 4, nothing changes for 35 years, but number 2, where there's no pilot.
So one of the main differences between option 2 versus the pilot option. With the pilot option, the revenue is set and it's steady. It'll be the same year after year. With the option number 2, where basically it's just onto our tax duplicate, the number would change. Now that number could go down based on depreciation or value repeals, but that number also could and would go up based on new levies that the district passes. So when you're talking about a 30-year agreement, there's a good chance there would be multiple levies and increased millage during that time.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else right now? Okay.
I know that there's been a lot of conversation about this and that people are looking at the question of whether solar has a role, a place in our county, in our community, impact on them, impact on a lot of things. I appreciate Todd giving us a recommendation because I know that his recommendation is based from a school district standpoint, that of the variety of situations that this district could find itself in, knowing Todd is very thoughtful and very conservative and very careful, choosing something that offers some guarantee for the school district, that offers some consistency. And I know that we have, as a district, seen us ending up putting more and more tax responsibility on our residential property owners. And I believe that this is one way that we can shift some of that responsibility or lock in greater responsibility from the non-residential property taxpayers in our district. I know that our decision has nothing to do as to whether the project will ever be completed, has nothing to do with what the county commissioners will choose to do. They can consider it, they can discard it, whatever. But I appreciate all the hard work and research that Todd has put in this. Thank you.
Thank you. I would comment, I know Diane has been a part of those conversations too, so yeah, appreciate that. Okay, next for my report, we had a community coffee this past Sunday, and based on Jermaine's recommendation last month, we did try a Sunday coffee from 2 to 3 in the afternoon. Nan and I attended. Nan, do you want to share anything from that, or you want me to?
We had 3 groups of people attend, probably about 12 people in total, which attendance was higher than normal, so we were glad to see that. 3 completely different topics. One had to do with technical education and potential options and partnerships with the school district through the Carpenter and Millwright organization. And so we'll be forwarding that information on. We had 2 students come with their parents to discuss the potential of additional foreign languages being offered at the high school, and then also some discussion in regards to credit situations. So it was wonderful to see young people advocating for themselves and in a very professional manner, so that was wonderful to see. And the third situation was homeschooling parents. So this particular family is a homeschool family. When they first started homeschooling, there were only about 20 families in Marysville. There's now over 100 homeschooling parents in the Marysville area. And they wanted to inquire about a potential policy where students could attend 1 or 2 classes, specifically at the high school level. And so that's going to be an object of discussion, I think, coming into the future.
Next policy meeting, yeah.
Yeah, we don't currently have a policy with regard to that. So interesting point of discussion as our landscape changes a bit in Marysville. I think we're going to have to be flexible on activities going on. But it's a great conversation. Everyone was extremely respectful, and it was a great opportunity to talk about our schools and all the positive programs that we have.
Yep. So I guess maybe moving forward, I don't know if we want to continue with this Sunday maybe for a couple months and then just see if people want to give us any feedback. If we're okay with that. Okay, next, we're going to have a work session on April 11th at 4:45, and the purpose of that work session is going to be to review our board protocols and work plan, also discuss our evaluation process. That would be for our self-evaluation and the evaluation of the superintendent treasurer. And so I'll be sending out some more information probably after spring break, maybe late March, early April. I'll send out some information for us to review to help prepare for the meeting, which kind of leads into some training highlights because I did attend a Valuing Evaluations webinar recently. And so, as part of our work plan, we like to share some highlights from training. So kind of the overall theme of that webinar was that the purpose of evaluations is not a caught you attitude, and just that reminder that we're all here to promote and support success. So they talked about the importance of staying objective, staying in our lane as board members, but agreeing on expectations and priorities. And one thing that I found really helpful is they shared a calendar recommendation that, kind of starting with setting your goals at the beginning of the school year, the importance of having some open discussion about that so our community knows what the goals are as well. And then kind of a timeline throughout the year to touch base with the superintendent and treasurer. How are things going and things like that. But they had a few ideas that are different than how we handle it. So I'll be including that with the information that I send out for our work session so we can discuss that. And then Nan and I attended the board member 201 session that OSBA, Ohio School Boards Association, offers. And from that, I know one thing that I think we both got out of that was that at the end of the meeting, they suggest that each part of our governance team kind of share one or two highlights from the meeting that you feel we need to share with our family, friends, neighbors, anytime we're out in the community. So just kind of some points of focus, things that are going on in the district. Nan, did you want to add anything from that board member 201?
So just to summarize, we have several sessions. First one was on boardsmanship and how to create a positive communication environment for your board. Then we had legal updates, policy updates, communication updates. So there's a lot of information packed into that session, but it gave us a huge laundry list of items to discuss on our April 11th meeting. So it was very, very helpful, kind of as a launching pad for things that all boards should be kind of looking at and evaluating. One of the key things coming out of that is a thorough policy evaluation that we're going to start that process after the April 11th meeting, going through and evaluating all the policies for the district.
Okay, thank you. And then let's see, Central Region Spring Conference was on March 9th. Just wanted to shout out Dick Smith, our board member here, was recognized for receiving the Master Board Member. I think people were aware of that in our community, but this was the official recognition at the Spring Conference, so congratulations. And he was also quoted in the recent OSBA Journal magazine. So if you haven't seen that, I think it's kind of near the end of the magazine where they talk about training and the Star Awards program. Also, a couple of things to remind you or to share with you is that Success Bound is kind of a new program that Bruce Daniels is helping to head up, and they focus on the importance of the partnership between business and education. So there's going to be an event on April 12th, and I did forward an email to all of you with that registration information. Steve Stivers is going to be a keynote speaker as well as Bruce Daniels. So I think that would be a nice thing to attend. Let's see, also, just for anybody watching, the Ohio Department of Education is accepting nominations for the Ohio Teacher of the Year. This would be for the 2023 Ohio Teacher of the Year. So if anybody is interested in nominating their teacher, their kids' teachers, just go to the Ohio Department of Education website, which is education.ohio.gov, and they are accepted through April 8th. More training that's available for our board, the Board Leadership Institute, offered by Ohio School Boards Association, is going to be on May 6th and 7th. That's another great event. It's all day on Friday and then half day on Saturday, and it's just for board members. So I encourage anybody who's available to attend that. And that's it for my report. Student Achievement Report, please. Man.
All right, regarding Student Success Magazine for the month of March, I wanted to highlight two specific items that were featured in the magazine. The first one was District Helps Grandparents Navigate School Tech, and I thought that was kind of important item because we actually have a lot of grandparents that have custody of their grandchildren in the Marysville School District, and tech is growing very quickly, and it can become very complicated and cumbersome, especially for grandparents that are not familiar with it. So I thought that's kind of an wonderful program that they've implemented, and I can share more details about that if anybody wants to see it. The second one is 5th grade students pitch community garden to City Council. So I thought it was a great partnership activity here, especially with Scott's. We've done this at different schools. We've done it at Early College High School with the that indoor garden there. And then also I know that Edgewood's done it, probably a couple other schools too. But we have a great opportunity to partner with a company like Scott's and encourage gardening, especially with the cost of fruits and vegetables right now. We might all want to plant a garden. But a couple things I wanted to share some information on. Thanks.
Thank you. Legislative report, and Mr. Smith, I hope you're not going to read your 8 pages that you sent us.
No.
Thank you. No, but thanks for sending all that information. There's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on, and I provided material for you to read. I want to point out just a couple of things. On House Bill 126, I'd like to thank Tracy Richardson. I know that she worked very hard in the House of Representatives so that the House would not accept the amendments that were made in the Senate to that bill. As a result of her work and the work of others, the House voted 0 to 90 to reject the Senate's work. And so that bill now goes back to the Senate. It is likely to end up in a conference committee. And I'm still working. I had a meeting with Senator Reneke. I'd met previously with Representative Richardson. I've continued to reach out and meet with people in the Realtors Association. I had a phone conversation with Andrea Weaver, our auditor, about that, and still working to see if we can't get the legislation to a point that it's more acceptable. There's been very little in terms of the backpack bill that we've passed a resolution in opposition to. I've given you some recent changes in enacted law. The Supreme Court issued a decision where they rejected some of the maps, and so our primary elections are probably going to be delayed. And the last thing is that OSBA, as part of my National Relations Network assignments, asked me to contact Senator Portman and oppose sections of the omnibus bill that was in Congress. It passed in the House. Within 48 hours, it passed in the Senate, and there were virtually no changes to it. I did contact the senator's office, but that has now been passed, and the impact is going to be on our school lunch programs. There was not an extension of the authorities for the Department of Agriculture, and that was what I was asked to address, which I did. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Safety report, Mr. Ferguson.
Yes, good evening. I've submitted a written version of the report to the board members, so I'm not going to read it verbatim. Just want to highlight that if you listen to podcasts, the Union County Drug-Free Coalition, Empowering Teens to Live a Healthy Drug-Free Life, uploaded their podcast yesterday, and it's speaking about gaming, like gambling, and it's kind of a weird day. We have the March Madness tournament who started, so it's an awkward time to give this report. But the message is for parents to be mindful of the behaviors that we encourage and we model that could lead to gambling addiction. And until a person's mature enough to make those decisions independently, and the brain chemistry is mature enough to just be very mindful about those behaviors. April is Alcohol Awareness Month, and it really should be alcohol prevention month, and not to be aware, but the coalition is going to be focusing on preventing underage drinking and encouraging parents to have those same conversations. I know the coalition has some concerns about the MORA, the expansion of MORA, which is, if you've ever been uptown Friday night, you'll see individuals with designated cups drinking alcoholic beverages. The current proposal will expand these hours from noon to 10 p.m. each day of the week, and also expand the district boundary to include a couple of businesses. One business is located in a residential neighborhood. The main concern is really the everyday aspect of this expansion that the coalition has. And at the last council meeting this week, I think this will be revised based off the conversations that members of council had. So that concludes my report.
Great, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Just again, like parents listening, if they've got a strong concern about that or have questions, then they can reach out to City Council or somebody there. So thank you very much. All right, business part of our meeting. I would now accept a motion to approve the draft minutes from our February 17th regular meeting.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Smith.
Second.
Second by Mr. Keck. Any corrections, revisions? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Keck?
Yes.
Mr. Ferguson?
Yes.
Ms. Savage?
Yes.
Mr. Vine?
Yes, motion carries. Next, we have our Board of Education items, and we'll do a motion for each one of these resolutions. So the first resolution is a motion to approve a resolution. It says the board recognizing that the legal authority to approve solar projects rests with the county, but based on the county's request for a school district recommendation, the board would recommend accepting option number blank. So if somebody would care to make a motion, we can react.
I'll move that we accept the recommendation from our treasurer and respond to the county commissioners with option 4.
All right, motion by Mr. Smith that we share option 4 as our preference with our county commissioners. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Savage. And now, how about some discussion?
I'll start. I know that the recommendation that we've received from the treasurer is based on his sincere belief of what is best for the school district, that it's based on the finances, and it is based on the research information he has with legal counsel and people that are more involved in this than what we are. And there may be a lot of issues, pros and cons, one way or another with solar. But I think the county commissioners have asked. They have to make a decision. What decision do they think, or what decision that they could possibly make would be in the best interest of our school district? And after conversation with our treasurer, trusting in the judgment that our superintendent and treasurer have researched and so forth, I moved that option 4 would be what we would send as a preference to the county commissioners.
Thank you. Other comments, questions, discussion?
I guess I just want to say, first off, I'm not against solar and I'm not against people's property rights. I think that's a very important thing. I am very scared of locking in the tax revenue from this at this point in time. I think that it looks good this year, next year, and maybe even 5 years from now. But I think we're really shooting ourselves in the foot further out than that because we're just not able to predict what the tax rates are going to be, you know, out toward the end of this. And so I think, you know, looking back on tonight's decision, and really it's not our decision, but looking back, if it were our decision, it may look like a foolish mistake. In my lifetime, I've never seen property values go up as fast as they have in the last 2 years. And I've made a couple personal mistakes on that and watched things just go right on by me and never thought it would ever get to this. And it looks like it might even get worse than that. And so I don't think it's a good financial decision, and I hate to argue with our treasurer because I think he knows a whole lot more about it than I do on the financial end of it. But I just think that it's hard to predict where we're going to be 10 years from now, let alone 35 years from now on these taxes. And I'd hate to be, well, I won't be here 35 years from now, but I'd hate to be looking back and say, boy, we really missed the boat on these taxes. I also think that the solar company has come to us kind of late in the game and said, well, I wonder if we can, you know, knock a few dollars off of this and put some more money in our pocket as we go along, because they've jumped through all these hurdles to get everything approved, and now suddenly they want a pilot program. And you know, their window of opportunity is shrinking statewide, not just Union County-wide. And so I think they will probably go ahead with it regardless, but that's just my personal opinion.
I do like to thank the county commissioners for including us in the conversation, You know, 4 options being presented tonight. I also, at the same time, wish that the commissioners would maybe take more ownership of this, and I don't want this big discussion about solar farms to be put in, well, the school districts support it, or they don't support it, or they prefer this, or they prefer that. I really do not believe it's our job. Strictly from just a revenue, looking at what's our possible revenue, I personally like scenario 2. I know the motion is for scenario 4 because, you know, they already got their approval. So, I mean, it's now your choice. The developer, do they want to proceed with their project or not? I don't think we necessarily should say, oh, thanks for, you know, welcome to our community. Here's an abatement, a pilot program. It's not an abatement, but just a pilot program. Here's the pilot program. Thank you for coming. If they already approved, then I think scenario 2 is the best route because it, you know, it has a higher revenue for the school district. And if we're going to entertain anything here, I think we should be looking out for the revenue line, the most revenue for our districts. That's where I stand. I'm okay with scenario 4, but I think scenario 2 is the best option from just looking at revenue.
And real quick, just to jump on what Bill said, you know, as far, you know, kind of joking, not arguing with the treasurer. And I just would make a point that, you know, both of you make very good points, and I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, and I'm not I don't feel like we're arguing, because I mean, I feel like there's not a right or wrong answer. I think, you know, 2 is a good option. I'm only looking at, you know, more certainty. So I'm not against what you're saying either.
Kind of goes towards that whole gambling, right? Like, did you have any comments, Nan?
I guess what I wanted to just recognize is that I understand that the option 2 does show the most amount of money, but option 4 shows the most stable amount of money. And something that we have struggled with kind of mightily is that every 2 years we get a different budget formula from the state, and it goes up and it goes down and it goes up and it goes down. And long-term planning is extremely difficult. So I also recognize that pilots are kind of the standard for economic development incentives today in the state of Ohio. So I guess that's that.
Nan brought to my attention, maybe we should ask, how does scenario 2 and scenario 4 play out with the state funding formula? Maybe that could be something, a good question we should discuss.
Based on the current state funding formula, which only goes one more year, so you know we're talking about any amount of certainty is short, but with scenario 2, the value of the solar farm would be added to our tax duplicates, so that would basically increase our real estate and our public utility personal property values, which would, from a state funding standpoint, make the district look more wealthy, which would then impact our state funding negatively, but as I've mentioned before, not on a dollar per dollar basis. So I would think we would see a potential slight decrease based on that. But again, we're talking about what we know for 1 year, whereas option 4, that currently, based on the current formula, that pilot revenue would not be counted against us in terms of state funding.
I think the only other thing I wanted to comment is I think with these conversations, and the commissioners even asked in that email where they asked for our preference, they also asked if there was anything else that we might be interested in asking of the company. So I think, you know, I think we're going to have this resolution for the commissioners, but it's important that we continue to have that conversation as well. Some other things, whether it be additional cash or whether it be other partnerships or maybe some solar for our district, you know, who knows? So just some things like that, just wanted to point out. So any other comments amongst us? Okay, in that case, roll call, please.
Knowing, I will make a comment, knowing that we don't have a crystal ball, knowing, you know, we don't know what state funding's going to be, we don't know what decision the county commissioners are going to make. We have a lot of unknowns about, from my standpoint, about our decision tonight. But based on the information that I have available to me at this point, I vote yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Savage?
Yes.
Mr. Ferguson?
Yes.
Mr. Keck?
No.
Ms. Devine?
Yes, motion carries. Next, I would accept a motion to approve the 4 bond resolutions.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Keck,
Second.
second by Ms. Savage. Any questions or comments on this?
One question. Right after the email got sent out, the Fed announced rate hikes. How are we locked in, or is there?
We're not locked in. The number projections we have already assume that the rates were going to go up some, so there's a little bit of room. Now, did it go up higher, or then I don't know that answer yet. So, you know, we still have time to reverse course if we need to.
Well, I mean, with the savings that, I want to, you know, commend you. I think this is a great move for the district, for our financial state, and so I'm in support of it. Thank you.
Now, I want to clarify for me, we're going to reduce the entrance that we pay over roughly the next 7 years. And during that time, that would amount to about $2.5 million that would not be paid by our taxpayers. Now, the auditor still retains the ability to fluctuate the amount collected in order to make sure that the bonds are paid in an appropriate manner. Is that right?
Correct, and you know, we do want to maintain a certain amount of reserve in our bond fund, just for a matter of a huge, you know, property values have been going nothing but up, but that doesn't mean one of these days they couldn't take a dive or something like that. So you want to have, or maybe there were a collection issue or something like that. So you want to have a little bit of a reserve, but with bonds, the current bonds would all be paid off in 2029, and at that point, you know, we would end with a zero balance.
Yeah, and it was about, what, 2 years ago that the auditor lowered the collection by
Correct.
2 mills.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no more comments. A roll call, please.
Mr. Keck?
Yes.
Ms. Savage?
Yes.
Mr. Ferguson?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Fine?
Yes, motion carries. Next, I would accept a motion to approve the resolution for a replacement of the roof at 212 Chestnut Street.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Smith,
Second.
second by Mr. Keck. Comments and questions?
That building is going to become our administrative building, and I know that we've got plans to do a lot of remodeling, so it only makes sense to make sure that the roof is in good shape so that we don't potentially damage any of the renovations that are being made in the future. So I think I'm glad to see this as being kind of the first step in that process.
A couple of quick points I wanted to mention. One, as I mentioned, this isn't part of the Russilli part of the project, but at the same time, this was discussed, and you know, they're part of the planning and the timing and everything, and coordinating everything around, you know, when is the proper time to do the roof versus when is the proper time to do other things. So they are involved, but it's not they're part of the project. And I also wanted to note that we're doing this project through a purchasing consortium. So you'll note that we didn't do any bids. So this project wasn't bid because with a purchasing consortium, the project is essentially already bid, and the state recognizes that as a project that has been bid.
And can I ask you real quickly, though, this has always been on like that 20-year forecast of renovations and things like that?
Correct.
So you were anticipating needing to do this?
Yes, we were able to handle this with our existing roofing budget.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
I have few questions. What do we appropriate for the existing roofing budget in the fiscal year 22?
I don't have that number off the top of my head.
Okay. The second question is, I really struggle to understand how this is not a part of the renovation project that we have a construction manager at risk for. I cannot find any discussion or anything that said, hey, this year we are going to repair the roof of East Elementary. Was this budgeted before? I see this all being one project, and I think it should come forth with the construction manager at risk, submitting their plan. Here's everything we need to do to fit this building for these purposes. I really struggle to comprehend how this is outside the scope of that project, that we have a construction manager at risk.
Well, to say that it's not part of the project, I guess you're looking at semantics, because obviously this is part of the overall plan. But Russilli is not overseeing this. Russilli is not part of managing the company that is going to be doing the roof. And it's not going to be part of the GMP, that guaranteed maximum price that we would be asking for approval, like I said, possibly in May. That roof is not going to be part of that GMP because we're doing it on our own, not through Russilli.
I'm also, like, just kind of to your point of, like, no discussion earlier, if you recall, earlier in the year, we were talking about selling the building. And so this, you know, as part of that 20-year permanent improvement forecast, they kind of lay out when they think things are going to need to be replaced. And, you know, we knew that there were some major needs at East Elementary. That was one reason why we had talked about selling the building, because at that point, we hadn't even entertained the thought of using it. But then once that changed and we were going to be using it, then like, okay, yeah, well, we are going to be replacing the roof. So I think that's probably why you didn't see or hear any comments about the roof replacement. And really, to tell you the truth, like every year we'll have resolutions to do blacktopping or roofs or things like that. And, you know, we probably didn't talk about it earlier, but if you go and look at that 20-year forecast, there's going to be things laid out that they're planning on doing. So I think that's kind of one of those in the weeds that we don't really get involved in knowing what each project is going to be. So I guess that would be my take on this.
I personally do not want to spend any investment until we know what the cost of the overall project's going to be. I don't think we should move forward with this resolution because I want to know, here's the renovation plans for East Elementary, for the central office, here's the dollar amount, and what happens if things change and we do not move forward, then we're repairing a roof. I mean, a year ago, the building was going to be sold. That's where we were. We were not, if we were still under that premise, which I know we're not, we would not be investing money into the roof. Correct? I mean, correct? That's my understanding. We would not be spending
If we
money.
were to be selling the building, I mean, there would be the debate of do we need to fix the roof or not. I wouldn't say for certain we would or wouldn't. That would just be speculation. If we were not doing this project and we were leaving the building as its current purpose, we would still be doing the roof project.
Okay. But we don't, I didn't see it in the appropriations for, I didn't see that listed in the permanent improvement.
So, for example, the way the Permanent Improvement Fund works, if you looked at our appropriations for asphalt next year or our appropriations for flooring next year, you're not going to see that, you know, Naven is getting a new parking lot or the floor at Mill Valley is going to be replaced. It is a dollar amount, and then our staff, you know, Jeff Wargo, our maintenance expert, we meet each year. He meets with each building and determines, you know, here's my budget amount. What are our top priorities, and can we fit those into the budget? So there's not a line item that's going to tell you that 6 years from now, this building is the one that's going to get the new roof or whatever. Now, he may have an idea in his head based on useful lives and, you know, what's the expected lifespan of a roof and those kind of things. But it ultimately is going to come down to priorities and planning, and we have meetings to talk about those things.
A follow-up question. Those projects are listed when you have your fiscal year permanent improvement budget, correct? So
the projects that we're going to complete in the following year.
Yes.
Yes.
So those projects are listed. Were those projects listed? Was the East Elementary roof project listed when we approved fiscal year 22 permanent improvement fund?
I don't think it was listed in that particular appropriation, no.
Thank you.
Todd, you mentioned that we went through a consortium in order to make this purchase. Would Russilli have access to the consortium, and does the consortium save us money?
Your first question, I don't know the answer to that. If you were going through Russilli, would we then be able to access the consortium? I don't know for sure. I would tend to think no, but I can't answer that for sure. I can look into that and get an answer for you. Secondly, does it save us money? I mean, yes, that's the whole idea of going through the consortium, is that you're getting the buying power of, you know, all different entities across the state and getting a better price.
Any more questions or comments?
I guess I would comment and say if we were going to keep the building, that would be doing the roof no matter what the use, you know, was going to be. And since we made that decision to keep it, I think we've got no choice but to keep it. I mean, the roof, that is.
Or maintain it, right? I think we're going to keep it, right? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Keck?
Yes.
Mr. Ferguson?
No.
Ms. Savage?
Yes.
Ms. Devine?
Yes, motion carries. Next, I would accept a motion to approve the treasurer action items.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Savage,
Second.
second by Mr. Smith. Anything you'd like to point out, Todd?
I pointed out that there's some big variances on the cash flow this month, which are due to just timing with real estate advance collections. So those should work themselves out in March, if not April, and I think we should be on track with projections.
And wasn't some of that also just the new formula and how you had to post certain things?
Yeah, there's also different variances in some other line items with the new state funding formula that didn't really get implemented until January. There were some real significant changes in how things are done and had to be reconciled. So there actually were some errors made in January that we corrected in February. So that's also why you see some different changes. Again, those aren't changes in our cash in total, just a shift from one line to another to align to how the state is saying things should now be recorded. I would note there's a couple after-the-fact forms in there, which would probably be relatively new to you because we haven't had those in a while. So by our accounting standards and audit requirements, when somebody wants to purchase something, a teacher or someone wants to purchase something, we have to do a purchase order before we actually acquire the liability of making the purchase. So we've done pretty good, and we haven't had any of those for a while. That's a good sign, but we had a couple where something kind of slipped through the cracks. So this is basically saying, oops, they initiated the purchase before the purchase order was in effect. So this is just for audit purposes. It makes it okay that we had that happen. And then also note we had multiple donations on here that we're approving, and just thank those donors for that. And I think that is it, unless there's any other questions. Oh, the other thing I wanted to note, there's also a increase in our appropriations. The biggest dollar amount there is for the Permanent Improvement Fund. I think that number is $4 million. That is increasing in part multiple things. One is to cover the roof and other fiscal year 23 projects that even though the project won't usually start until the summer, we sometimes have to get the purchase order in place prior to, so we need to increase the budget for that. Excuse me. And then also is preparing the budget for the renovation project. Although that's not been approved yet, and we're still working on the planning phase, this just gets that budget ready so that we're able to approve a purchase order when that time comes.
Thank you. I would note, like on that after the fact, the purchase orders after the fact, I appreciate the fact that they have to fill out a form and they have to say, okay, this is why it happened and this is what we put in place so it doesn't happen again. So.
Yeah. And it was a good sign that we hadn't done it in so long. I was like, Donna wasn't sure where to put it and how to, so we had to look it up. So that's actually a good sign.
That is a good sign. Lots of good processes in place. Questions, comments of Todd?
I have a question. With the appropriations for the Permanent Improvement Fund, what is the breakout cost from the fiscal year 23 permanent improvement budget, the roof that was just approved, and then what's that number compared to this number of the project that we have not seen any proposals for?
I think the roof is, if I remember correctly, 340,000 around there.
And then the other, the fiscal year, you said fiscal year 23.
So I'm basically going under the assumption that we'll be around $4.5 million for the renovation. Now, again, that's just an assumption because we, as you said, we don't have a contract yet or the design is not finished. So that's just creating a placeholder based on money that was already in there in contingency. That gives us that I guess amount of room that is set aside.
I feel more comfortable if I have a plan and here's how much this was going to cost, and then I appropriate the dollars to it. I don't understand why we would appropriate $4 million for this project when we do not have a plan proposed in front of us to know what the true costs are. I don't feel comfortable with that and that large kind of appropriation being there without any numbers or any proof that we need to spend that much. And I think if we vote to make that appropriation, then we're going to signal saying, hey, we're willing to spend this money. Show us what you got. And that's my reservation there.
I would just remind you that we're voting on a budget. This isn't actually approving the project. That doesn't change that, when the contract comes up for approval, if that contract is voted down or we don't approve it, that money doesn't just get spent. We can reduce that appropriation anytime. For my purposes, this is just planning.
I think the construction manager at risk is doing the planning, and they will present a bid. Here's a proposal, here's how much things cost, and then we vote to appropriate those dollars at that time. That's how I would feel more comfortable doing that. I don't think this is the right approach.
If I can, I recognize your concerns, but for me as a board member, I want to make sure that before we ask somebody to plan something, that we've gotten estimates from architects previously that have given some general ballpark numbers about what it's going to cost, that we know that we have the money in our budget set aside for that particular project. So as the planning goes on, there's a degree of confidence that when the final plan is presented, that we're going to be able to say, we like the plan, we have the money set aside and within our budget to be able to make those payments. It's also true that we will come up with a permanent improvement budget for the year. But as that year goes on, there are going to be circumstances that changed. 9 months ago, if somebody had said we need to talk about roof replacement, we probably wouldn't have had that discussion. And I'm not sure exactly when I remember we appropriated or established the permanent improvement budget. But this fall, it became evident that we were going to need the Chestnut building, the East Elementary building, for our own purposes. And at that point, then the thinking begins, what do we need to do to ensure that that asset to the building is maintained in an appropriate form? If the roof is not in good shape, we could have over the summer, over the next couple of months, tomorrow, we could have rain and water damage in the building that would complicate some of the things that we need to do. So understanding that as the project, the total overall project is going forward to create some administrative buildings, that project could be broken into smaller pieces. And the roof being one piece, and then the interior renovations being yet a second piece. And none of those discussions would have taken place by this body, I think, within the last, or anything older than about 6 months ago. So I know that our permanent improvement budget allocates placeholder amounts in each area in which we think we may have some expenses, that when we sit down and we say, well, this asphalt can last until next year, we don't need to replace it, then that asphalt money is then available to go someplace else where we've identified something that wasn't necessarily going to last nearly as long as we anticipated. We may need some new windows in some buildings that will help us on the energy loss and so forth. So I appreciate your concerns. I feel comfortable in moving forward because I see this as part of the overall administrative building. I know that the roof, you know, if it's not repaired, that it can be problematic. I don't know whether the Russilli or the architects have a preference as to whether the roof is done first or they do it as part of the project. But since they are in conversation on that, I would expect that they would not see any problems in dealing with this situation. And as I said earlier, I think having a good roof will help to protect the materials, help to protect any of the renovations that are done in that building.
And actually, I mean, the appropriation process is, like, there are some kind of requirements that you have to go through for budgeting purposes and things like that as well, I think.
Right, and I mean, to Jermaine's point, it's not like I couldn't have waited until that way. I mean, I could have waited. That's just the way, this is just the way I chose to do it and the way I've done it in previous projects as well. So there's not a right or wrong. But part of the way that it is done, it has to be done in the system first. I don't just pick an amount and say, hey, will you approve this amount? Then I go stick it in the system. I have to do it through the system first because there's a lot more involved than just picking a budget number. It also, there's a matter of comparing that to our estimated resources, which is a state law that our county auditor checks. So, you know, you have to also look at estimated revenues, and do those things match up? If they don't, then you have to increase estimated revenues, and all these reports end up going to the county auditor who checks them and makes sure everything is kosher. So it's, you know, a little bit of an involved process.
So in other words, it's kind of nice to get it done.
Right.
So that you're not rushing
Yes.
at the end. Gotcha. Okay. Any other comments or questions? Roll call, please.
Ms. Savage?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Ferguson?
No. No.
Mr. Keck?
Yes.
Ms. Devine?
Yes, motion carries. And finally, I would accept a motion to approve these superintendent items.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Ferguson,
Second.
second by Mr. Smith. Anything you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, on the HR action items, you'll be seeing classified and certified staff being hired for the 22-23 school year, as well as a new bus driver for us as well this school year. We do have some resignations and or retirements coming up at the end of the school year. I'd like to point out 2 retirements. One that actually has just taken place. Jeff Ankrum, Marysville High School custodian, is retiring. He's been with us for 8 years. We'd like to wish him the best of luck as he goes off into retirement. Also, too, I'd like to point out Sharon Flick. Sharon's been a special education aide for us for 21 plus years. She's an amazing lady. And again, we wish her well as she goes to retire after this school year. Just a couple other items, a few unpaid leave of absences, base SAC hiring, adding to our classified substitute pool. Also to some spring supplementals, volunteer and booster paid coaches. Also On the consent items, we have 20-plus volunteers we'd like to get your approval for. The list continues to grow, especially since our volunteers are back into buildings. It's exciting to see. Other superintendent items, really student teachers, field placement approvals, and 2 overnight trips. So, any questions?
I know we have a band director on there too.
Yes.
And
Family's here.
I know. And I also wanted to, just a shout out, I saw Sarah Nichols. I know Sarah has been, I think she was a PTO president at Edgewood.
She was my PTO president when I was the principal over at Edgewood. Just an amazing person.
Yes.
Has been the library aide over at Naven for many years.
Right.
And has been working towards getting her teaching licensure, and she's obtained, close to obtaining that, and she's just going to be wonderful.
Yep, that was really exciting to see that. Any questions, comments from people?
Just nice to see the robotics team and the DECA earn their achievements, and they're earning these overnight trips through their hard work, so it's nice to see that.
Yep, sure is.
Making great memories for sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay. No other questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Ferguson?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Keck?
Yes.
Ms. Savage?
Yes.
Mr. Bonner?
Yes, motion carries and it's official. So congratulations.
Madam President?
Yes.
The family.
Yes,
the
yes, come on
family's
up.
here, and
Come on up.
I was going to
Yes,
ask
yes.
that we
Yep.
give somebody from the
Yep,
family.
she's coming up.
And Gail, if you want to,
Representing Mr. Fannin.
if you want to, Gail, that microphone
right.
back there will work.
Perfect.
If you press the person button, it will turn red for you.
All right. Stephen did send us a little message and asked us if one of us could please get up and say something for him. And first of all, he wants to apologize that he had to leave without being able to do his own speaking. But he just wanted to say how very excited he is to have this opportunity to come back and be a part of the Monarch family. And he wants to thank everyone that's been involved in helping this come about. He said thank you to Mr. Cochran, to Mr. Chafin, to Mr. Langhouse, to Mr. Holden, Mrs. Allen, for selecting him and giving him the opportunity. And he is so thankful that he can be a part of the Marysville family once again. So thank you guys very much. This means a lot to us, and we're so very happy.
Yeah,
Thank you.
We are thrilled too. We can't wait for that first Friday night to see the band out on the field and band concerts, all sorts of great things.
Yes,
so we're really excited.
Well, thank you, thank you, thank you.
All right, I think we are now to the point of comments and questions from board members. We'll start with you, Mr. Smith. And I will remind, if you thought about it, just kind of going back to our board member 201, if there's, one or two things that you felt would be important to share with our community from this meeting.
First of all, I want to thank the members of this board for attending the Central Conference dinner. It was an honor to receive that particular award. I believe there were only a limited number, maybe 2 in the state of Ohio, that were so honored, and it was nice for me and reaffirming of the working relationship that we have, that all of you were there. So I want to thank you very much for your attendance. I want to point out one thing that I think is very significant. The Marysville, in the board notes that we receive, the MHS board report talked about the grant award, the Ohio School Wellness Initiative, that the high school has been involved in, and that is looking at the social and emotional wellness of students and staff. And the report here is really wonderful. I would point out 3 areas of strength that are mentioned here. 100% of the staff are recognizing students as exemplars of their social emotional behavior and academic achievement. 57% of the staff were able to articulate the distilled version of the Marysville habits of the mind, empathy, and persistence, and 50% of the students could recall an instance in the last 2 months when they were recognized as an exemplar for their behavior. So that's, I think, a good example of some very positive things happening in our high school.
Thank you. Mr. Keck.
Well, I didn't go to the board member 201, so I should be able to get a pass on this, but I will say the high school, I was back in the high school helping out as a volunteer just yesterday, and was a judge for an FFA activity, and that was fantastic, and they're doing a great job in the ag department, much better than I would have. But while I was in the building, Mr. Cochran drugged me into a meeting that was already ongoing, and tied it up another hour, but for planning purposes, and it was really great to see the planning that's going on even for next school year at a time when they're, I'm sure swamped with just dealing with this year. So he's not here, so too bad.
Well, I think that would be a good thing to share with the community too, just kind of that knowledge that we're always looking to the future. We're always looking at what, how things went this year and what can we do better next year. So I think that's a good thing to share. Thanks. Nan.
From the notes, Mill Valley first graders went on a field trip and they seem very excited about it. I don't know when they actually got to go, but it's in giant letters on their update, so they must have been very excited about it. So congratulations to them. Couple highlights I wanted to talk about. Raymond Elementary, they've been doing a readathon, which I just love that idea. And our students read 97,752 minutes, surpassing their goal of 80,000 minutes. So that's just wonderful. I love to see that. Nothing like elementary school students loving to read. That makes your heart happy. Northwood Elementary, our kindergarten students are participated in a kindness challenge. So I think that's very excited to help build the culture of the schools. I think every building could probably use a little bit of that kindness challenge. So just want to say we really appreciate that activity.
Maybe our whole community, Nan.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Just a couple highlights that I've seen. Congratulations to the Marysville Marching Band and Choir for their trip to Disney. It looks like they had a wonderful time. Sue and I attended the show choir showcase. That was wonderful. Great to see all the schools back in the building again, and such a talented group of people. I want to do a shout out to Mallory Huffman. Her painting was nominated for the Ohio Governor's Youth Art Exhibit. It's a fantastic painting. I looked at it, I was a little bit amazed at the talent she has. And congratulations to Larry Fox on the Ohio Capitol Conference Hall of Fame. So just a couple highlights.
Thank you. Jermaine.
Yes, I want to welcome the Fannin family to the district, and I'm looking forward to the exciting chapter that lies ahead for you and our district together. Secondly, I think there's not a day goes by on social media where we're not seeing one of our kids, one of our teachers just knocking things out of the park and representing our district in a great, amazing light. And so it seems like maybe 10 things a day is posted. I'm like, man, we're really busy here. And our kids are really cool. And so I just wanted to give that shout out. I know we had some dissenting votes on my end, and I want to just let the board know that I'm coming from, a very pure perspective. Since our meeting in January about this, I'm really having some struggles now with the inflation, knowing we have a levy next year about this project, and is this the right timing of the project with the rising cost of goods and services? I want to make sure we pass our levy, and I want to make sure that we're all together on this next side, and that any projects we do, we're not paying premium price for it because of our economy, the turbulence in our economy. So I am learning. I know, Todd, we've been on the phone probably every day, taking up your lunch break, and I thank you for your time. And just know that I'm learning. I don't know it all, and I made some mistakes, but that's why we're all together as a team, and I still represent the team. So thank you all.
Thank you very much. Todd, any comments?
Nothing to add.
Jonathan?
No, thank you.
Okay. Then I'll close it out here. Thanks again to Bunsold for an excellent presentation. Really appreciate all the work that you're doing, Michelle. And really just for your ongoing commitment to that holistic kind of approach to students' education. So good work. And then I guess when I was thinking about the pointing out something and looking at our agenda tonight, one of the things that I think is so important in our district is just is all of the partnerships that we have. So I think about the commissioners reaching out to us and asking for our input, and then just as the city and as we're experiencing all this growth, the partnership that we have with our city, mental health partners. When you look at some of those building reports, we've got great mental health partners to support our students and families. Partnership with law enforcement. I know they introduced the new SRO at the high school since Officer Petzinger was promoted. So I look forward to meeting Officer Lewis, I believe. It was Paul Lewis. And then just partnerships with our parents when I think about volunteers and think about going to the showcase and seeing these parents that are there from 7 o'clock in the morning until midnight or 1 o'clock. That's just a lot of commitment, and it shows to me that, it tells me that people believe in our district, and we're just so fortunate to have all those partnerships. So that was one thing that I wanted to point out. And then kind of going to the presentation from Bunsold, just the fact that education is so much more than academics. So, you got your report cards, you have your testing and all that kind of stuff, but when it comes down to it, it's building those relationships so that people feel comfortable and they want to learn and they're excited to learn. And then shout outs. Player of the Year, JoJo Eberhardt in basketball, and Lady Monarchs just smashed it this season. And then FFA, we've had so many state qualifiers, DECA, BPA, wrestling, Sean Andrews, Coach of the Year, bowling, Japan Bowl, mock trial, gymnastics, show choir. I mean, as you say, the list is just endless. So I'm so proud of everybody. And let's see, we also received the video from Northwood, their presentation that we couldn't do in person. And again, it was kind of sad that you can't have these conversations with the building principal, but as you know, we are hoping to do building visits the week of April 18th and 25th. So then we can have our chance to thank people in person and see some of the great things that are going on in our district. So, and tomorrow, Northwood has their Passion Fair. So if you're planning, are you going to be a part of the Passion Fair? Okay, good. What time are you?
I'm there both morning and afternoon.
Okay, and what are those time ranges, if you remember?
Off
Like
the top of my
10-ish?
head, yeah, it's like 10 to 11:30,
Right.
and then
1 to 2:30, something like that?
2:30, something like that.
Okay, so if you have some time and you want to stop by Northwood, check it out.
I'll have a very interesting presentation.
Okay, great. Well, with that, I would accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Smith,
I was going to say, have a good spring break to our students
Oh,
and staff.
yeah, yes, yep, that's right.
Second.
Second by Mr. Ferguson, and hope you're enjoying that corned beef and cabbage that I'm going to have on Saturday because of tonight's meeting. Okay, roll call.
Yes?
Yes.
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 Yes, motion carries. We are adjourned at 8:34.